The barking came out of Zeus like a warning shot, deep and ragged, and Officer Nathan Briggs froze between the folding tables with his hand still on the leash. The big industrial front loader on the back wall shook once on its own, hard enough to rattle the out-of-service tag taped across its glass. Underneath the hum of the fluorescence, clear as a bell, 3 small knocks answered from inside the drum. Nathan's mouth went dry. Someone was in there. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments what part of the world you're listening from, and hit subscribe so you don't miss stories like this one. The rain had started sometime after midnight, the slow, steady kind that soaks a Midwest town from the roof down. And by 2 in the morning, the parking lot of the Spin and Fold on Millbrook Avenue was empty, except for Nathan's cruiser and a rusted blue sedan tucked against the dumpster. Cedar Falls, Iowa, was the kind of place where nothing much happened after 11 at night, and Nathan had spent the drive over, half convinced he was wasting his shift on a noise complaint. Gloria Mendez, the woman who owned the laundromat, had called the non-emergency line 3 times in 5 days, saying the machines were making sounds no washer had any business making, and that her regulars had stopped coming in. The dispatcher had passed her over to the K9 unit as a courtesy because Gloria's late husband had been on the force for 30 years and nobody had the heart to tell her no. Nathan had almost turned the car around at the last light. Zeus had not let him. The 4-year-old Belgian Malinois had ridden the whole way in the back cage, with his ears pinned forward and his breath fogging the window in short, sharp puffs. And when Nathan finally rolled into the lot, the dog had let out a single high whine that raised the hair on the back of the officer's neck. Zeus did not whine at nothing. Zeus was the calmest working dog Nathan had ever partnered with. A level-headed animal who had cleared warehouses and empty schools without so much as a twitch. And if that dog was telling him something felt wrong, then something was wrong. Nathan had opened the back cage and let Zeus out on the 6-foot lead. The dog had crossed the wet asphalt in a stiff, purposeful trot, nose already working the seam under the glass door. Inside, the air was warm and thick with the smell of dryer sheets, detergent, and the faint, sour edge of old lint burned onto a heating coil somewhere. Rows of yellow plastic chairs bolted to the tile floor. A soda machine with a burned-out bulb. The muted rumble of 8 machines running through the night on quarters that had been dropped hours earlier by people who had already gone home. It should have felt like nothing. Zeus had cut straight through the middle of the room, past the folding tables, past the change dispenser with its handwritten "exact quarters only" sign, and locked up in front of the last washer on the left. The biggest one. A 30-pound industrial drum, taller than a man's chest, with a round glass door the size of a serving platter and an out-of-service tag hanging off the coin slot. And then he had barked. Not the alert bark Nathan had trained into him on the drug field. Not the tracking bark he used on a scent. The other one, the one Zeus had used exactly twice in their partnership, both times over a body. Now Nathan crouched by the machine with one hand on the dog's shoulder and the other on his radio, and he listened. Under the mechanical thrum of the room, past the wet slap of clothes in the drum next to him, he heard it again. A soft, human tap on the inside of the metal. 3 knocks. A pause long enough that he almost convinced himself he had imagined it. 3 more. Cedar Falls Dispatch, this is Unit K91, he said into the shoulder mic, keeping his voice low. I need paramedics and backup to 1712 Millbrook. Code 3, I've got a possible victim on scene, send everybody. He clicked off before he could talk himself out of it. Zeus was still frozen, muzzle pointed at the seam between the washer and the wall, and Nathan could see now what the dog had already known. The machine had been pulled forward about 3 inches from the tile. The floor behind it was dry. The floor under every other machine in the row was streaked with soap scum and the grey outline of water that had been slopped for years. This one, only this one, was clean. Nathan slid his flashlight out and knelt. The maintenance panel on the side had been unscrewed and replaced badly, the screws set at wrong angles, one of them missing entirely. He pried the corner up with his pocket knife, and the whole panel came away in his hand. Behind it, there was no washer. Not really. There was a shell of a washer, an empty steel box with the guts torn out, and behind that, a rectangular hole cut into the drywall, the exact size of a crawl door, framed in old 2x4s that were nothing close to modern code. Cold air breathed out of it, and with it the smell of concrete dust and mildew and something else, sharp and biological, the smell of a person who had not been able to wash for a long time. Nathan's stomach turned over. "Sweet Jesus," he whispered. Zeus pushed his head into the hole and let out a low, urgent whimper, and this time Nathan heard the answer clearly. A voice. Small, cracked, barely a voice at all. "Please." He did not remember drawing his sidearm. He remembered the weight of the flashlight and the low tunnel opening in front of him, and the way Zeus's shoulders bunched under his hand. He remembered thinking, whoever did this is still in the building. He remembered thinking, the front door was unlocked when I came in. "Stay with me," he told the dog, and then he ducked his head and shone the beam down the tunnel. The passage sloped down a foot, and then leveled out into a cinder-block corridor, no wider than his shoulders, running the length of the back wall. The ceiling was low enough that he had to walk hunched. Old iron pipes ran along the top, wrapped in flaking asbestos tape. Every 10 feet or so there was a metal ring driven into the wall, black with age, the kind you would use to tether something, or someone. He kept the flashlight low and moved forward, and Zeus padded beside him with his head down, his breath the only sound. 20 feet in, the passage opened into a small chamber, and Nathan's flashlight found her. She was curled in the corner on a foam pad that had gone black at the edges, wrapped in a wool blanket that had once been dark green. Her wrists were red and raw from something soft, cloth maybe, that had been wrapped around them for a long time. There was a plastic gallon jug of water and a paper plate with a half-eaten sandwich beside her, the bread already going hard. She flinched when the light hit her, and she raised a hand to shield her eyes. "Ma'am," Nathan said, keeping his voice as gentle as he could while his heart hammered against his ribs. "My name is Officer Briggs. I'm with the Cedar Falls Police. I'm going to get you out of here." She did not answer for a long moment. Her lips moved, cracked and pale, and no sound came out. Then she managed a whisper. "Emily. My name is Emily." His mind snapped to the flyer on the corkboard back at the station, the one that had been there for 11 days, a photograph of a smiling 22-year-old with light brown hair and a chipped front tooth, Emily Carver, missing from a college 2 towns over, last seen leaving a coffee shop on a Wednesday afternoon, walking to her car with her backpack on her shoulder, and then nothing, a whole town's worth of nothing. Nathan reached for his radio again, and that was when Zeus's head snapped up, and the low growl that started in the dog's chest was not aimed at Emily. It was aimed back the way they had come. Someone was moving above them. The ceiling of the passage was the floor of the laundromat, and Nathan could hear it now, footsteps light and fast, someone who knew exactly where the boards would creak and was avoiding them. Then, farther back, a door opening, a key turning in a lock, a back door, maybe an alley exit he had not seen. "Stay with her," he told Zeus, and the dog understood the way he always did, dropping into a half-crouch between Emily and the tunnel mouth, ears back, teeth just barely showing. Nathan turned and ran the length of the passage bent double, the flashlight beam bouncing off the cinder block, and burst back into the laundromat with his weapon low along his thigh. The back office door, the one behind the change dispenser that he had assumed was a supply closet, stood open. A small monitor on the desk was still on. It showed a grainy black and white feed of the chamber he had just been in, Emily and Zeus in the frame. Nathan felt sick. Whoever it was had watched him find her, had watched him crawl in. He heard the back door slam, and he moved. out into the alley, rain slapping his face, cruiser lights still spinning silent blue and red off the wet brick. He caught the shape of a man in a dark hooded jacket cutting across the loading dock behind the old Chinese restaurant next door, moving fast but not panicked, moving like he had run this route in his head 100 times. "Cedar Falls police, stop, get on the ground," Nathan shouted, and the man did not slow down. Nathan ran. Behind him, back in the tunnel, Zeus made a decision that no one had told him to make. He put his nose against Emily's shoulder for one long second, as if promising her something, and then he tore through the laundromat and out the front door in a dead run, tracking Nathan by scent and by the sound of his voice. And Nathan turned the corner of the loading dock just in time to see 100 pounds of dark brown fur launch off the wet concrete and take the running man down at the shoulders. The Malinois did not bite. He landed on the man's back and pinned him with all his weight, teeth bared an inch from the back of a bare neck, and he held there and waited. It was one of the cleanest takedowns Nathan had ever seen, and he had not given a single command. "Good boy," Nathan panted, dropping to one knee and kicking the man's arms out. "Good boy, hold, hold." He got the cuffs on and rolled the man over. Soft face, round wire-rimmed glasses knocked crooked, thin sandy hair plastered to a high forehead by the rain, late 30s, maybe 40, not a face anyone would look at twice in a checkout line. Nathan had seen him before, he realized, when he had come in for coffee at the gas station 2 blocks down. The man had been in a spin and fold polo shirt behind the register, had smiled at him, had asked how the shift was going. "What's your name?" Nathan asked. The man blinked at him through the rain, and for the first time his face did something, a small tightening at the corner of the mouth, almost a smile. "Vincent," he said. "Vincent Ashford. And you're too late, officer. You have no idea how late you are. Sirens finally, coming up Millbrook." Nathan dragged him to his feet and marched him back to the cruiser and shoved him into the cage. Zeus watched from 3 feet away, still growling low and steady, and did not stop until the door was closed. Nathan ran back inside. 2 paramedics were already coming through the front, and he waved them toward the maintenance panel. He crawled back down the tunnel himself and reached Emily just as the beam of her rescuer's flashlight found her, and she was still exactly where he had left her. But she was crying now, deep, silent sobs shaking her whole thin body. One hand still stretched toward the tunnel mouth as if she had been trying to follow. "You came back," she whispered when he crouched beside her. "You said you would come back and you did." "Nobody's leaving without you," Nathan told her, and he meant it more than anything he had ever said in his life. The paramedics slid a stretcher in as far as it would go, and Nathan carried her the last 10 feet himself. And when they lifted her into the ambulance, she reached out with a shaking hand and buried her fingers in the fur at the back of Zeus's neck. "Thank you," she whispered into that fur. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." And that should have been the end of it. That was the story Nathan expected to write up in his report. The story the paper would run in the morning under the headline about a missing college student found alive. A grateful family, a brave dog, a quiet town breathing out. He did not know yet that they had walked into the smallest room of a much larger house. He did not know yet that Vincent Ashford, sitting handcuffed in the back of his cruiser, watching the rain streak the windows, was smiling because they had found the one prisoner he had wanted them to find. The hospital was quiet at 4 in the morning. Nathan sat on a plastic chair in the hallway outside Emily's room, with a paper cup of coffee going cold in his hand. And he listened to the low murmur of the nurses at the station and the far-off beeping of monitors, and he tried to make his hands stop shaking. Zeus lay across his boots, eyes open, watching every person who passed. Every so often the dog would lift his head at a sound Nathan could not hear, and then set it back down again. Around 5, a small nurse with kind eyes came out of the room and told him Emily was asking for him. She was propped up in a bed that looked too big for her, with a warm blanket to her chin and an IV in her arm, and a plastic cup of ice chips in her hand. Her lips were less grey. Her eyes were clearer. but there was something underneath the exhaustion in her face, a fear that had not left when the tunnel did, and Nathan knew that look. He had seen it on people who knew something they were afraid to say out loud. "Emily," he said, sitting down slowly on the edge of the chair by the bed, "I know you're tired. I don't want to push you. But if there's anything you can tell me tonight, anything at all, it would help me help you." She looked at Zeus, who had settled at her bedside with his chin on the mattress, and she reached down and let her fingers rest between his ears. "There were others," she said. Nathan went very still. "Others?" She nodded, and her eyes filled up. "Not in the tunnel, not with me. But I heard him talking, on his phone, when he thought I was asleep. He talked about a shipment. He talked about a house. He said, 'This one's ready. We can move her to the house.' And then he said, 'No, she's not ready. Keep her longer.' He wasn't talking about me. He said her name." "Whose name, Emily?" "Rachel," she whispered. "He said Rachel, and I heard him say she had been there for 2 months." Nathan's coffee had gone completely cold. He set it on the floor beside the chair and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, forcing his voice to stay steady. "How long were you in that place, Emily?" 11 days, she said. "I counted the meals. He brought 2 a day. Sometimes he brought a book. He brought me a book, officer. Like this was a hotel. Like he was doing me a favor." She started to cry then, and Nathan reached for the box of tissues on the tray table and held it out, and Zeus made a small sound in his throat and pressed closer against her hand. "He never hurt me," she said. "That was the worst part. He never even yelled. He talked like he liked me, like we were friends, like this was normal. That was the scariest thing, that he could do this and think it was normal." Nathan waited until she was ready. "He said the house was ready for me next," she whispered. "That was tonight. He came in and told me tonight was the last night in the tunnel. He said the house was in the country. He said in the morning I would go and I would never come back. That's why he moved the machine. That's why the panel was loose. He was going to take me out through the front. He was going to walk me out in a laundry cart under a pile of clothes. I heard him practicing with the cart in the middle of the night." She closed her eyes for a long moment, and when she opened them, there was something new in them. "That dog," she said, looking down at Zeus. "That dog saved my life by hours, not days. Hours." Nathan stayed with her until she fell asleep, and then he stood up as quietly as he could and walked out into the hallway and radioed the station and asked to have Vincent Ashford put on a hold. No bail hearing, no phone call. Not until they had turned that laundromat inside out and figured out what a house in the country meant. That was the first turn, and it happened at 5 in the morning on a Wednesday, and everything in Nathan's careful little life bent quietly around it. By noon, the spin and fold on Millbrook Avenue was cordoned off with yellow tape, and half the Cedar Falls Detective Bureau was inside it. Nathan stood in the parking lot with Zeus at his heel and watched Sergeant Karen Ruiz walk out of the front door with a paper evidence bag in each hand and a face like a thundercloud. "Briggs," she said, and jerked her head toward the cruiser. "Walk with me." Karen Ruiz was 51 years old, 5'2", and had been running the K9 division for 12 of those years. She had trained Zeus herself from the day he arrived from the breeder. She did not do small talk, and she did not waste words, and when she was worried, everybody who worked for her was worried. "Talk to me about last night," she said, popping her trunk and setting the bags inside. He told her everything, the barking, the tunnel, Emily, Vincent's face when he said too late, the name Rachel. Ruiz listened without interrupting, her jaw tightening a notch with every sentence. "Nathan," she said when he was done, "we just pulled a ledger out of that back office, handwritten, names and dates going back 4 years. Some of the names have check marks, some of them don't. Emily Carver is on it. She has no check mark." "What do the check marks mean?" Ruiz's eyes went hard and flat. "That is what we are going to find out." Nathan drove Zeus back to the kennel to feed him and let him rest, and then he went straight to the station and did not go home for 3 days. The ledger had 17 names. 6 of them had check marks beside them. 2 of the 6 were women who had been reported missing in the last 4 years and never found. 2 more were listed as runaways in cities as far away as Omaha and Kansas City. One of them was a case Nathan remembered vaguely, a woman named Maria Delgado, who had disappeared from a truck stop off Interstate 80, a case that had gone cold within a month. The last one, at the bottom of a page dated 7 months ago, was a name Nathan did not know. Rachel Nguyen, 20 years old, nursing student at a community college in Waterloo, about half an hour up the road. Reported missing 7 months and 3 weeks ago by her mother. Last seen leaving a late shift at a diner, presumed to have run off with a boyfriend her mother did not like. Case had been quietly downgraded within 6 weeks because there was no evidence of foul play, and the boyfriend had also vanished. Nathan sat at his desk and stared at that name and felt a cold weight settle behind his sternum. The boyfriend had also vanished. Now he wondered. He pulled Rachel Nguyen's file and read every page of it, and by the time he was done, he understood something that made him want to throw the folder across the room. Rachel had worked as a night attendant at a laundromat during high school, in a small town outside Waterloo, owned by a chain that had been bought out 3 years ago by a shell company registered in Delaware. The Spin and Fold on Millbrook Avenue in Cedar Falls belonged to that same shell company. Vincent Ashford was not the owner. He had been hired 18 months ago as a night manager. He had come with excellent references from a laundromat in Des Moines, references that Nathan called that afternoon, and discovered had never been signed by any real manager who had ever worked at that business. There was somebody above Vincent, somebody who had put him in place, somebody who had put a man with those particular hobbies in charge of a room full of vulnerable people at 3 a.m, in a building with a secret tunnel, in a town where nobody was paying attention. The second turn, and now the ground under Nathan's feet was not solid at all. He walked into Sergeant Ruiz's office at 7 that evening and closed the door behind him. She was on the phone. She listened, said, "Call me back," and hung up. "Whatever you're about to tell me," she said, "I already know some of it." He told her about the shell company, about Rachel Nguyen and her old laundromat job, about the references that were fake. Ruiz let him finish, and then she opened her top drawer and pulled out a manila folder and slid it across the desk. "Delaware Shell Company is owned by 2 other shell companies," she said, "which are owned by a trust in the Caribbean, which is administered by a law firm in Chicago. We are not going to unwind that in a week. What we can do is find whoever hired Vincent, because a real person had to write him a real check every 2 weeks, and a real person had to sign the paperwork when the state came around to inspect. There is a name somewhere on a piece of paper in that laundromat. Find it." Nathan and 2 detectives spent the next 36 hours pulling apart every drawer, every filing cabinet, every hollow space in that building. Zeus came with him and worked the tunnels, because they discovered that the passage under the back wall was not the only one. It ran 140 feet under the block, exactly as the building's old blueprint had shown, and it had 2 more chambers at the far end, both empty, both with fresh foam pads and fresh gallon jugs of water and fresh paper plates, ready. Rachel Nguyen had not been in any of them, but in the 3rd chamber, tucked behind a loose cinder block, they found a burner phone. It had been used 3 times in the last 2 weeks. All 3 calls were to the same number, another burner, registered to nobody. The phone was password locked, but the tech at the state lab in Ankeny opened it in an afternoon. There was 1 text thread, 3 messages, all from Vincent to the other number. "Ready to move Emily tomorrow. Confirm the barn is ready. Barn is ready. Bring her at 4. Change of plans. Cop came in tonight. Dog found the panel. Girl is out. Do not come." That last message had gone out at 2:11 in the morning. From inside the cruiser, Nathan realized with a jolt, while Vincent had been sitting cuffed in the back seat. He had gotten his hands on his phone in his coat pocket somehow, or he had had a second phone. Nathan had assumed the pat-down had cleared him. He had been wrong. The third turn. Vincent had warned somebody. Somebody who knew a cop had shown up. Somebody who was now in the wind. "Barn," Nathan said out loud in the evidence room, staring at the 3 lines of text on the screen. "Barn. He has a barn. That's the house in the country." Ruiz was already on the phone with the state. They pulled every property record they could find, associated with any shell company connected to the laundromat's owner, and then they started cross-referencing against agricultural properties within a 100-mile radius of Cedar Falls. It was slow, painful work. There were thousands of barns in Black Hawk County alone. While the detectives worked the paper trail, Nathan worked Vincent. Vincent Ashford was, in interrogation, exactly what he had been in the parking lot: calm, polite, almost gentle. He wore a fresh county jumpsuit, and he sat in the plastic chair with his hands folded on the table, and he answered every question with the same small, tight-lipped smile. "I am going to tell you nothing," he said. "Not because I'm trying to be difficult, officer, because there is nothing you can offer me that they can't take away. Do you understand? I would very much like a lawyer now, please." He got one. A quiet man in a good suit who arrived from Des Moines within 3 hours of being called. Nathan had never seen him before. The lawyer sat next to Vincent and did not say a single word for the rest of the interview, and Vincent did not open his mouth again. Nathan came out of the room and stood in the hallway and rubbed his face with both hands. "Somebody is paying for that suit," he said to Ruiz, "and Vincent is scared of them. He would rather sit in prison for the rest of his life than talk about them. That's what we're up against." "Then let's find them first," Ruiz said, "before Rachel Nguyen stops being on a list and starts being a check mark." The fourth turn came on the third day, and it came from Gloria Mendez. She showed up at the station at 10 in the morning with a cardboard box in her arms and mascara running down her cheeks. She had not slept. She had spent every night since the arrest turning over everything she thought she had known about her own business, and she'd gone home the night before and dug through her late husband's file cabinet, and she had found something. "Officer Briggs," she said when they sat her down in a small conference room, "I need to tell you something, and I do not know how bad it's going to be." Gloria was 63 years old, born in Cedar Falls, married to a Cedar Falls cop for 38 years, until he died of a heart attack 3 years earlier. She had inherited the laundromat from her father, who had bought it in 1972 when the old garment factory had been converted. She had run it herself until her knees went bad, and then her nephew had started helping with the paperwork. "My nephew," she said, and her voice broke. "My sister's boy, Marcus Alvarez. He's 34 years old. He works in real estate in Des Moines. 3 years ago, right after Frank died, Marcus came to me and said the laundromat was losing money and I should sell it. I did not want to sell my father's business. Marcus said he had a buyer who would let me stay on as owner on paper, keep my name on the sign, keep the neighborhood happy, but they would handle the finances and pay me a monthly stipend. I said yes." She pushed the cardboard box across the table. "These are the papers Marcus brought me. I never read them. I trusted him. Officer Briggs, I signed my business over to whoever those people are, and now I do not know if my nephew knew what he was doing, or if he knew and did not care, or if he knew and did it on purpose. I do not know which is worse." Nathan opened the box and started reading. The papers established Gloria as the nominal owner and manager of the Spin and Fold, with all financial decisions made by a management company whose name led straight back to the Delaware Shell. Marcus Alvarez had signed as the notary on every page. Marcus Alvarez, real estate broker, Des Moines. Nathan pulled his name up in the database in 90 seconds. Clean record, no warrants. A modest 4-bedroom house in the suburbs, a wife, 2 kids. He also, it turned out when Nathan dug 2 levels deeper, owned a controlling interest in a small property management company that leased and administered 38 commercial and agricultural properties across central Iowa, including, Nathan discovered at midnight on the 4th day, a working dairy farm with a large converted barn on 120 acres off County Road W44, about 40 minutes northwest of Cedar Falls. Registered to a shell, managed by Marcus Alvarez's company, Marcus's own name buried 5 layers deep in the paperwork. "Sergeant," Nathan said, standing in the doorway of Ruiz's office with his laptop open in his hand, "I found the barn. They did not raid it that night. They could not. If they went in loud and Rachel was there, whoever was watching her might do something they could not take back. And if she was not there, they would burn their only lead. Ruiz called in the state, called in the county sheriff's office, called in a tactical unit out of Waterloo. They put a plainclothes surveillance team on the barn from a farmhouse a mile away, and they set up a listening post on Marcus Alvarez's phone. And they waited. The 5th turn came at 2 in the afternoon the next day, and Nathan almost missed it because he had finally gone home to sleep. His phone rang. It was Ruiz. Her voice was flat. "Vincent Ashford is dead." Nathan sat up in bed. "What?" "Found in his cell an hour ago. Hanged himself with a bedsheet, except the bedsheet was cut clean, Nathan. Whoever hanged him did a real good job of making it look like he did it himself. Camera in the hallway went dark for 6 minutes. Guard on that block called in sick this morning. We are looking at him now. He is not answering his phone." Nathan was already pulling on his boots. "They cleaned up," he said. "They cleaned up," Ruiz agreed. "Which means they think Vincent knew something we did not know yet. Which means they are getting ready to move. Get down here." He got there in 12 minutes. Zeus rode shotgun with his head on the console because that was the fastest place to load him. And the dog had picked up on Nathan's tension the moment he stepped into the kennel. In the parking lot of the station, Ruiz was already handing him a Kevlar vest. "Change of plan," she said. "We are going now. The surveillance team just saw 2 men load a large duffel bag into the back of a van at the barn. They are pulling out of the driveway." "A duffel bag," Nathan said. "A duffel bag," Ruiz said, "and it was moving." They went. The barn sat back off the county road, at the end of a long gravel driveway, lined with old oak trees. A big red structure with a peaked roof and a rusted weather vane, and a silo attached to one side. The kind of place a family portrait photographer would pay to use as a backdrop. The tactical unit went in through the front. Nathan and Zeus and Ruiz followed 30 seconds behind. The van was already gone. Inside, the smell was the same one Nathan had smelled in the tunnel, only worse, concentrated. The floor of the barn was normal enough, hay and dirt and old cow stalls, but the loft above had been renovated into a series of small partitioned rooms with padlocked doors, and every one of them was empty. Beds were still warm, water glasses still half full. Whoever had been up there had left in a hurry. In the last room, on the mattress, was a small pink hair tie. Ruiz picked it up in a gloved hand. Rachel Nguyen's mother said in the initial report that her daughter always wore a pink hair tie. Always. "Where did they take her?" Nathan said. The state trooper coordinating the raid was already on the radio. Roadblocks were going up on every route out of Black Hawk County. The van's plate had been photographed by the surveillance team. State Patrol had it in the system. Every county in a 100-mile radius was looking for it. 2 hours max, the trooper said. "We'll find it." Nathan was not sure they had 2 hours. He walked back down the ladder from the loft and out into the driveway with Zeus at his heel. And he stood in the gravel and let the dog work the ground. Zeus moved from spot to spot, nose down, and stopped at the tire tracks the van had left. He sat. "Good boy," Nathan said, And then, because it was crazy and because he could not think of anything else, he said, "Zeus, find." Zeus did not need a scent article. Zeus had been in that loft. Zeus had smelled every person who had been kept up there. Zeus lifted his head and put his nose in the wind and set off down the driveway at a purposeful trot, following the tire tracks in the wet gravel, and Nathan and Ruiz and 2 troopers piled into vehicles and rolled along behind him. For half a mile, the dog stayed on the shoulder of the county road, working steadily, and then he turned onto a smaller gravel road and then onto a dirt lane between 2 cornfields, and Nathan felt his pulse rise. They were not headed toward any highway. They were going deeper into farmland. The 6th turn came when the dirt lane ended in a clearing behind a stand of trees, and there in the clearing was a small metal outbuilding, and behind the outbuilding, half hidden by tall grass, was the van. Nobody was in the van. Zeus went straight to the outbuilding door and locked up and let out one deep, hard bark, and Nathan and the troopers moved into position. They breached the door. 2 men were inside. Neither of them was Marcus Alvarez. One of them ran and was tackled by a trooper. The other put his hands up immediately. In the middle of the room, on a bare concrete floor, the duffel bag from the surveillance photo was unzipped and open. Rachel Nguyen was in it, and she was alive. She was thin. Her hair had been cut short and badly. Her eyes were sunken, and she had a fresh injection mark in the crook of her left arm. Whoever had moved her had drugged her to keep her quiet, and it had almost worked. The paramedics from the ambulance that had followed them at a distance were on her within a minute. They kept her breathing. They kept her heart going. On the ride to the hospital in Waterloo, Zeus rode in the back with her, his head on her leg, and Rachel, half awake, weakly touched his ear with the 2 fingers she could still move and whispered a word nobody could quite hear. She lived. She lived because a Belgian Malinois had followed a scent down a dirt road in Iowa, and because a small pink hair tie had told them she had been real, and she had been there, and she had been worth the chase. That should have been the end. That was going to be the story, Nathan thought, driving back to Cedar Falls late that night with Zeus asleep in the passenger seat and the sun coming up pale over the fields. 2 women home, 2 men in custody. A dead man in a cell who had chosen the wrong bosses. He was going to write his report and go home and sleep for 2 days. Then Ruiz called him again. "Nathan," she said, and there was something in her voice this time that he had never heard before, something small and cold. "You need to come to my office, now. Do not talk to anybody at the station on your way in. Just come to my office." He came. She closed the door. She had a laptop open on her desk. She turned it toward him. "The dead guard," she said. "The one who did not come to work the day Vincent hanged himself. We just pulled the security footage from the parking lot of his apartment building. Look." Nathan looked. The video showed the guard, a middle-aged man in a plain jacket, walking to a dark sedan in the lot at 6 in the morning, getting into the passenger side, turning to speak to the driver. The angle of the camera caught the driver's face for exactly 1 second before the car pulled away. Nathan's stomach dropped through the floor. He knew the face. He had seen it at every crime scene, every ceremony, every retirement party for the last 7 years. He had bought that man a beer at the Union Hall 2 months ago. "That's Deputy Chief Whitaker," Nathan said, and his voice did not sound like his voice. "Yes," Ruiz said, "it is." The 7th turn, and now the whole floor had tilted, and Nathan could feel himself sliding. Ruiz let him sit with it for a long minute. "Deputy Chief Roland Whitaker has been on this force for 29 years, she said. "He signed off on the paperwork 3 years ago that quietly closed the Maria Delgado case out at the truck stop on Interstate 80. He signed off 6 months ago on the paperwork that quietly downgraded the Rachel Nguyen case. He also personally signed the recommendation letter that put me in charge of the K9 unit. Do you understand what I'm telling you, Nathan?" You think he steered you into your own job to keep an eye on you? I think he steered every hire and every reassignment in the missing persons chain for a decade, Ruiz said. I think he is the reason a girl from Waterloo could disappear for 7 months and nobody at the state level ever got a proper file on it. I think he is why Vincent Ashford ended up dead in a cell before he could say a name in court. Is he the top? Nathan asked. No, Ruiz said. That's what I need you to understand. He is not the top. He is a middleman. There is a lawyer in Chicago somewhere, and there are people above the lawyer, and Roland Whittaker is a foot soldier for them. He is a big one, but he is a foot soldier. And we are not going to catch the people above him if we scare him off now. So, what do we do? You are going to walk out of this office, she said, and you are going to file your report exactly the way you would have filed it. 2 arrests, 2 rescues, 1 suspect deceased in custody, investigation ongoing. You are going to go home for a few days, and you are going to keep Zeus with you every second, because if Whittaker realizes we know, he is going to try something. And Zeus is the only living creature in this town I would trust with your life right now. Nathan went home. He kept Zeus with him. He did not answer the phone unless it was Ruiz. He waited. The 8th turn came 4 days later in the form of a call he did not expect from a name he did not know. The number was blocked. He almost let it ring out. Something told him to answer. Officer Briggs. A woman's voice, older, tired. Yes. My name is Alma Whittaker. I am Roland Whittaker's wife. My husband was outside on the back deck last night on his cell phone. He did not know I was in the kitchen. I heard him tell someone that he had a problem with a K-9 officer in Cedar Falls, and that the problem was going to be handled this week. I've been married to Roland for 34 years, officer. I know what his voice sounds like when he is arranging something. I also know what my life is going to be worth if he finds out I called you. Please believe me. Nathan believed her. He called Ruiz. Ruiz called the state. Within 6 hours, the FBI was involved because the shell company thread reached across state lines and because Alma Whittaker's phone call had turned an internal police investigation into a federal case. Nathan and Zeus were quietly relocated for 72 hours to a safe house in Iowa City. Alma Whittaker was moved to a hotel under a different name. The trap was set. The trap sprung at 11 at night in the parking lot of an all-night diner off Interstate 280, where Roland Whittaker met a man from Chicago in the back booth to talk about the K-9 officer in Cedar Falls and how to make him disappear. The man from Chicago was wearing a wire the FBI had put on him 90 minutes earlier because he had chosen to talk when they had shown him the sentencing guidelines for federal human trafficking charges. He said his name was Alan. He was a paralegal. He had been driving envelopes back and forth between Chicago and Iowa for 11 years, and he did not want to spend the rest of his life in a federal prison, so he had agreed to help. Whittaker was arrested in the parking lot at 11:48 at night. The FBI agents who cuffed him were polite, professional, and did not raise their voices. Whittaker did not resist. He looked, in the harsh light of the diner sign, very old and very tired and very small. The 9th turn came 2 days later, when the paralegal Alan opened up. He named names, real names. A criminal defense attorney in Chicago named Douglas Trenton, who had for 15 years quietly represented a network that moved young women out of small Midwestern towns and into private houses across 4 states. He named the 2 owners of the shell company. He named a bookkeeper. He named 3 drivers. He named Marcus Alvarez, Gloria Mendez's nephew, as the man who had recruited Vincent Ashford and put him in the laundromat. He also named 17 victims by first name, and among them was a name that made Ruiz sit down hard when she read it. Elena Alvarez, age 19, missing since 2018, Marcus Alvarez's own younger sister. Nathan stared at that name for a long time. He fed his own sister into this, he said quietly. Or somebody fed him his sister and he has been paying them back with strangers ever since to keep them from doing something worse, Ruiz said. We do not know yet. We are going to find out. Marcos Alvarez was picked up at his home in the Des Moines suburbs at 6 in the morning on a Saturday, still in pajamas, in front of his wife and 2 children. He did not run. He did not resist. He sat down on the floor of his own kitchen and put his hands on his head and cried. And when the agents got him into a chair, he said unprompted, "My sister. Where is my sister? Please, is my sister alive?" She was. The 10th turn came when a raid on a farmhouse outside Kansas City the following week produced 4 young women alive, one of whom identified herself as Elena Alvarez and asked with a voice cracked from disuse whether her mother was still living. Her mother was. Her mother had spent 7 years believing her daughter had run away to spite her. Marcos Alvarez, faced with the news that his sister was alive and that his cooperation had helped find her, opened up completely. He told the story from the beginning. Elena had gone to a party at 19 and had not come home. A man had contacted him a week later with a photograph and a demand. Marcos had been told that Eleanor would live as long as he made himself useful. He had spent 6 years being useful. He had put Vincent Ashford in the laundromat. He had signed the papers that let his aunt lose her business without knowing she was losing it. He had, he said, hated every minute of it, and he had never touched a woman himself, and he knew that did not matter, and never would. His confession filled 6 hours of tape and produced at the end of it a full map of the network across 4 states. 28 arrests followed over the next 3 weeks. 12 houses were raided. 23 women were recovered alive. 3 sets of remains were found in a wooded area outside Springfield, Missouri, and 2 of them were eventually identified as women whose names had check marks in Vincent Ashford's ledger. Douglas Trenton, the lawyer in Chicago, was arrested at his corner office on the 52nd floor of a downtown high-rise on a Thursday afternoon in front of his own staff. He had a boat, a house in the Cayman Islands, 3 ex-wives, and no answer at all when the federal prosecutor read the indictment. The whole thing, the paper said afterward, had started to unravel because a Belgian Malinois in Iowa had barked at a washing machine. Nathan came home from a week of federal interviews in Chicago to a Cedar Falls that felt, for the first time in his adult life, like a town that had opened one of its eyes. He did not sleep well for a long time. He would wake up at 3 in the morning thinking about that cinder block corridor, thinking about the metal rings driven into the wall, thinking about how close he had come to walking out of that laundromat and letting Zeus ride home in the back cage with his ears still forward and his message unheard. He would get up and go to the kennel at the back of his house and open the run, and Zeus would come out and press his broad head against Nathan's stomach and stand there breathing, and after a while Nathan would go back to bed. The 11th turn was smaller, and it did not make the news. 2 months after the arrests, a woman knocked on Nathan's front door on a Sunday afternoon. He did not recognize her at first, because the last time he had seen her, she had been in a hospital gown with an IV in her arm. Emily Carver stood on his porch with a paper bag in her hand, and Zeus, who had run to the door at the sound of the bell, sat down on Nathan's foot the moment he saw her and began to thump his tail so hard it sounded like a drum. "Hi," she said, and she smiled, and she looked for the first time since he had known her like a college kid instead of a survivor. "I brought him something. I hope that's okay." She had knitted Zeus a scarf. It was navy blue. It was slightly crooked. It was the first thing she had knitted in her life. Nathan let her in. She sat on his living room floor and put the scarf around the dog's neck and told him she was going back to school in the fall and that she had a therapist she liked and that she still could not stand the sound of a washing machine, but she was working on it. She stayed for 2 hours. When she left, she hugged Nathan on the porch and thanked him again, and then she said one more thing. Rachel is up in Waterloo, she said. She's still in the hospital. She has a long way to go, but she's going. I visit her every week. She wants to meet you and Zeus when she's ready. The 12th turn came a month after that, and it came from Rachel herself. She was still thin, still fragile, but she was walking again, and her hair was growing back in, and her eyes had color. She sat on a bench outside a rehabilitation center in Waterloo, with Nathan on one side and Zeus at her feet, and she told him something that she had not told the FBI. "The night before they moved us out of the barn," she said, "one of the men who worked there let a small thing slip. He was on the phone. He said that if the police came, they should burn the ledger. He said, 'Do not let them find the second ledger, the one from the beginning. There is a second ledger, officer, from before Vincent, from the years I do not know about. It has more names than the one you have. I thought you should know.'" The FBI went back to work. They found the second ledger 3 weeks later, in a safe deposit box in a Chicago suburb, rented under a false name, which the paralegal Allen finally remembered the location of after a long conversation with his own lawyer. There were 41 more names in it. Some of the names were survivors who were still alive, who had escaped or been quietly released, or had died natural deaths years afterward without ever telling their stories. Some of them were people whose families would finally, after decades, know what had happened. The task force expanded again. The investigation would run for another 2 years, and it would be Nathan Briggs, an officer from a small city in Iowa nobody had heard of, whose name would appear at the top of a citation from the Department of Justice for what a colleague called the single most consequential K-9 alert in modern American law enforcement. He would be embarrassed about the phrasing. He would frame the citation anyway, because it had Zeus's name on it too. The 13th turn was the quietest, and it happened in the middle of a Wednesday morning, 6 months after that first rainy night at the Spin and Fold on Millbrook Avenue. The Cedar Falls Town Hall was a small building of red brick with a modest auditorium in the back, and on that Wednesday morning it was full for the first time anybody could remember. Every seat was taken. People were standing in the aisles. There were reporters from Des Moines and one from a national morning show who had flown in specifically for this ceremony. There was a stage set up at the front with a small podium and 2 chairs, and a folding table with a small blue velvet cushion on it. And on the cushion was a bronze medal on a red, white, and blue ribbon. Nathan stood at parade rest to the left of the podium in a dress uniform that he had gotten out of the closet only twice in his entire career, and Zeus sat perfectly still beside him, groomed to a shine, wearing a new collar and a small ceremonial vest. In the front row, Gloria Mendez sat with a lace handkerchief pressed to her mouth, and beside her sat Emily Carver, holding the hand of her mother, and Rachel Nguyen sat 2 seats over with her own mother, and both mothers were crying openly. Marcus Alvarez was not there. Marcus Alvarez was in a federal facility in Illinois, awaiting sentencing, but his sister Elena, now 25 and thin and clear-eyed, sat in the 4th row between 2 social workers who had helped bring her home. She had asked to be there. Alma Whitaker was there too, quietly, in the back, wearing a scarf over her hair and dark glasses, and she and Nathan had exchanged the smallest of nods when he arrived. The mayor of Cedar Falls, a soft-spoken man with a grey beard and reading glasses that kept sliding down his nose, gave a short speech that was mostly thank you and mostly not memorable. Sergeant Karen Ruiz went next, and she was better. She was blunter. She told the crowd, without dressing it up, what Zeus had done, what Nathan had done, what a woman named Alma had done at great personal risk, and what a woman named Gloria had started by picking up a phone one afternoon because she trusted her regulars and she trusted her gut. She said the word hero exactly once, and she used it not for a person, but for an instinct, the instinct that says something is wrong when everyone around you is telling you it is fine. She said, This town owes its safety today to that instinct, and to a dog who did not know how to ignore it. Then Emily Carver's father, a large, quiet man in a jacket that clearly did not get worn often, walked slowly up to the stage, carrying his daughter's hand in his. Rachel Nguyen's mother followed. They stopped in front of Zeus. Emily knelt, and her father knelt with her, and together they took the medal from the velvet cushion and pinned it carefully to the ceremonial vest at the point of the dog's chest. The room was so quiet, you could hear the click of the pin closing. Zeus did not move. He looked up at Emily's face, and he thumped his tail exactly 3 times against the wooden stage, and then he sat still again. Nathan looked out over the crowd, and he saw Gloria in the front row crying into her handkerchief the way a person cries when they have finally been allowed to set down something heavy. And he saw Rachel with one hand pressed flat against her own chest, as if to keep her heart inside, and he saw Elena Alvarez leaning forward with both hands over her mouth. And he saw at the back Alma Whitaker take off her sunglasses and let 2 tears run down her face. And he understood something that took him another minute to put into words. He had walked into a laundromat 6 months earlier because a dog had refused to let him leave. He had walked out with a woman who had counted 11 days by meals. And that first small refusal, that low, ragged bark of a Belgian Malinois in front of a washing machine on a rainy Tuesday night, had travelled outward like a stone dropped in still water, and it had reached 40 women in 4 states and 1 7-year silence in a Des Moines house that had believed its daughter was gone forever. Some of them he would never meet. Most of them would never know his name. All of them were somewhere in the world tonight because a dog had barked and he, at the last second, had listened. He had thought that first night that the story was about the tunnel. It was not about the tunnel. It was about the tap. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. A person on the other side of the wall trusting that somebody, somewhere, might still be listening. The mayor stepped forward to close the ceremony, and Emily hugged the dog's neck one more time, and Nathan lifted his hand to his brow in a slow salute that was not aimed at any officer or official, but at the 4-year-old animal beside him who had made all of this possible by refusing one rainy night to walk back to the cruiser. There was a reception afterward in the small hall next door. There was coffee in paper cups, and there were cookies on paper plates, and there were far too many people trying to shake Nathan's hand. He worked his way through the crowd slowly, thanking everyone, letting Zeus be petted by every child who came up. At one point, he found himself in a quiet corner with Gloria Mendez, who took both his hands in hers and said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Officer Briggs, I keep asking myself what would have happened if I had not made that call. If I had told myself it was just my imagination. If I had been embarrassed to bother the police over a machine." "You did make the call, Gloria," Nathan said. "That is the only thing that matters." "But I almost didn't." "But you did." She held his hands a moment longer, and then she leaned down and rested her forehead very gently against Zeus's, and she whispered something quiet that Nathan did not quite catch, and Zeus closed his eyes and stood very still, the way he did when he understood that a person needed him to be a still, steady thing for a moment. Nathan drove home that evening as the sun set over the Iowa flatlands, and Zeus rode up front on the passenger seat with the medal still hanging off his vest, and Nathan reached over once at a stoplight and rested his hand on the dog's broad shoulder. Zeus, whose ears had been forward for the entire 6-month arc that had begun on a wet night on Millbrook Avenue, finally let them relax back against his head. He leaned into Nathan's hand. They rode the rest of the way home in silence, together, the way partners do. The Spin and Fold on Millbrook Avenue reopened 2 months later under new ownership, this time a small local co-op that Gloria helped set up. The washing machines were all new. The back wall was rebuilt. The tunnel was filled in with concrete. Gloria kept the sign her father had put up in 1972 because she said it deserved to stay. She also insisted on a small brass plaque near the front door that read only, "In memory of the ones who did not come home, and in thanks to those who did." She did not put anybody's name on the plaque. She said the town knew. Rachel Nguyen graduated from her nursing program the next spring, walking across a small outdoor stage in Waterloo with her mother in the front row. She sent Nathan a photograph of the ceremony in an envelope with a short note in careful handwriting that read, "You told me my job was to keep breathing. I did. Thank you." He kept the photograph in his desk drawer at the station where he could see it every morning. Emily Carver went back to college and switched her major to social work. 2 years later, she began a job at a shelter for women in transition in Cedar Rapids. On her first day of work, she wore a small silver pin in the shape of a paw print on her lapel. She has worn one every day since. Elena Alvarez moved back to Iowa and got a small apartment near her mother. She started volunteering at the same shelter where Emily worked, and the two of them, who did not know each other's names when they were being kept in the same network of houses, became friends. They meet every Sunday for coffee. Alma Whitaker moved out of the state to be nearer to her sister. She and Nathan exchange Christmas cards. Every year, hers arrives with the same short sentence written at the bottom. "Thank you for listening to a scared voice on the phone." Every year he sends one back with a photograph of Zeus in it. Roland Whitaker, Douglas Trenton, Marcus Alvarez, and the two men Nathan and Zeus arrested at the outbuilding at the end of the dirt road, along with 23 others across 4 states, went to prison for a very long time. Some of them, including Trenton and Whitaker, will die there. That is the justice the story allows. It is not enough. It is what there is. Zeus retired at 8 years old, after a working life that included, among many other things, the case that would come to be known inside the Justice Department as the Cedar Falls chain. He spent his retirement sleeping on a large cushion in Nathan's living room and taking slow morning walks around the neighborhood, and he greeted every child on the block by name. He lived to be 14. When he died, in his sleep with his head resting on Nathan's foot, Nathan sat with him on the living room floor for a long time before calling anyone. Emily came, Rachel came, Gloria came. They sat on the floor with him too. Nobody said very much. There was not very much that needed to be said. Nathan is still on the force. He works with a new K-9 partner now, a young female Malinois named Juno, with a serious face and an even more serious work ethic. He does not talk much about the tunnel anymore, but every Tuesday night, when he passes by the corner of Millbrook and the small brass plaque catches the streetlight for a second through the front window of the co-op laundromat, he slows down. Just a little. Just enough. He remembers a bark. He remembers 3 knocks. He remembers that the difference between a story that ends well and a story that ends in silence is sometimes only one person, or one dog, refusing to walk away. If this story moved you, take a second to leave a comment about the moment that got you the most. Hit the like button so more people can find stories like this one, and subscribe so you never miss the next one. Somewhere tonight, somebody is tapping on a wall. Somebody else is deciding whether to listen. We tell these stories so more people choose to listen.